Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. Greenlight.com/Wondery.
But her name is Stacy, but she was my best friend. Like literally we were inseparable. We used to say we were sisters. I mean, we looked at Playboy magazines together. We, we used to sneak into her dad's, actually we didn't even have to really sneak because they were literally on the back of the toilet, but he had like a whole collection of them, and just all the things that you do as kids. And then one day she wasn't allowed to play with me anymore. And I thought that it was because of me, because you don't know. I didn't know why. I just knew what did I do that hurt her? And honestly, I feel like that specific situation caused a lot of insecurity for me over the years. I mean, obviously I have a lot of trauma. Obviously there's abandonment issues and, all the things, but that in particular hurt me so bad because I thought, what did I do to make her not want to play with me anymore? She literally ignored me. And not because she wanted to, but because her dad told her not to. She wasn't allowed to play with me anymore. Her parents didn't let her.
That's Donna Anderson, the host of a number of podcasts, including the true crime series, The Hall Closet. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. Donna Anderson grew up in what she describes as a low-tier crime family outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the 1980s and the 1990s. She says that her family, the Halls, were not like the Gambinos or the Detroit Partnership or fictional ones like the Sopranos or the Corleones, but they made national headlines all the same. What makes Donna's story as a podcast host in the true crime genre somewhat unique is that she tells stories from the perspective of someone who is on the inside and who escaped. Donna says she's found safety and empowerment in her life experiences, a journey of survival and reclaiming power after what she described as a twisted and chaotic upbringing. While growing up, Donna's father, Frank, left. After that happened, her stepfather, John Hall, moved in. John was an alcoholic, a habitual car thief, and he also was a go-to informant for the Philadelphia Police Department and ultimately turned on his own family to save himself. He was responsible for more than 24 arrests, including one of his own stepson. Donna's mother, Phyllis, spent time in prison for child endangerment for abandoning Donna's younger sister. On her podcast, Donna calls her mother, quote, a candidate for the worst mom ever. Donna says that her mom transformed from, quote, just a really terrible mom into a flat-out criminal one. There were many examples of Donna's stepfather putting people in jail. Hall informed on two men in the murder of the jogger, Kimberly Ernest, that captured national headlines in Philadelphia and around the world. It was a trial that the New York Times covered when I first got there as a reporter. One article at the Times read, there were 432 homicides in Philadelphia in 1995, but just one that brought a teary tribute from the mayor at the victim's memorial service. Ernst, 26-year-old paralegal, was attacked while on a jog through Center City, a wealthy neighborhood of row house blocks. Donna's stepdad told the police that his stepson and Donna's brother, Herb, was responsible for and had confessed to the crime. But the police did not call Hall to the stand once they realized that Donna's mother, Phyllis, had a necklace inscribed with the name Kim that she was going to smuggle into jail and plant on Herb, who was eventually acquitted. Another example came out of Lower Moreland Township. Lower Moreland Township is a picturesque town of diverse landscapes, beautiful parks, meadows, woodlands, and a historic downtown with beautiful trails. On October 24th, 1986, 21-year-old Cheryl Suka was found in a stream underneath an 11-foot-tall stone bridge there. The police were suspicious because it appeared as if Suka had fallen, but the ski vest she had been wearing was wrapped around her lower body in a way that looked as if someone had tried to move her. There was blood on the outside of the coat, and Cheryl, who lived more than 4 miles away, did not drive a car, so it was curious that she had even made it to the remote bridge. Still, the death was ruled accidental until Donna's stepdad got involved. 2 years later, a neighbor of Suka's named Ernest Privilis was arrested along with 13 others in a drug raid and was placed in jail in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Soon after, Donna's stepfather told the Philadelphia police and prosecutors that the man, Ernest Privilis, had confessed to the murder of Cheryl Suka. He said Privilis had told him they had spent a few days with Suka before her death, getting high and at one point checking into a motel and making an unsuccessful attempt to have sex with her. Hall testified at trial that Privilis told him he later took Suka to the bridge, where she rebuffed him again and refused to give him money to help pay for the motel, which led him to assault her and finally karate chop her, which sent her flying off the bridge into her death. 6 family members, though, testified that Privilis was at home watching TV. The jury didn't believe him, and he was sentenced to 27 years. Eventually, FBI lab work pointed away from him. Donna believes that her father made up the whole story. If you can believe it, Hall was also responsible for pivotal testimony about another man who supposedly killed a woman on a bridge on the border of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and Burlington, New Jersey. The Philadelphia Daily News reported that prosecutors and police had rejected using evidence offered by Hall in 3 high-profile murders because they said it wasn't reliable. A few years later, the Philadelphia City paper raised questions about Hall's role in convicting Walter Ogrod in the killing of a 4-year-old girl. Ogrod was sentenced to death for the 1988 sexual assault and murder of Barbara Jean Horn in Philadelphia. Ogrod's conviction was vacated in 2020 after DNA found on a plastic bag that was used to cover the victim's body in a cardboard box didn't belong to him. And it became clear that the police had beaten one confession out of him and Hall had made up the other. These are just some of the stories. Today, we're going to discuss what it was like for Donna to grow up in a crime family, the abuse and trauma that she and her siblings suffered, and her transformation into a person now who is helping heal other people's suffering. Donna, I just wanted to thank you for joining the podcast. I really appreciate it. Most people know I do a lot of research whenever I have a guest, and your podcast was released. Your podcast was released in, I think, January of this year. And it's The Hall Closet, which I really love the creativity of the name. And I had the opportunity to listen to all of the episodes, read about your family in places like the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Daily News and anywhere where I could find information. And it was just such an interesting and powerful and human story. Before we got on, or before I even put together my notes for this, I felt connected in the sense that, I think a part of me felt like on its first blush, if I had heard a blurb of your story, that this wouldn't be relatable to me. But it was relatable in that deep human way that we all struggle and suffer. And it takes hard work to come out on the other side. So I'm really glad you're here. I'm grateful to have you here.
I am so glad, Jason, that you invited me. I definitely, from the first moment we started talking, I felt such a connection already with you. And I'm really glad that, I've been on a lot of, I've been asked to interview on quite a few podcasts, and not everyone really listens or takes the time to really know who I am. So that means the world to me. It really does mean a lot because you listened and did research on my story and on me, and you called it, right away that it's very human, and you picked up on the vibe of exactly what I wanted to do with the podcast. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. And I feel like, it's interesting you bring that up about like caring that somebody listened and took their time and sort of like took care. And I think for a lot of people who grew up in troubled households, for whatever reason, it could be things like what you went through or other challenges people face. I think one of the things that a lot of kids feel like they weren't heard, they weren't seen, they weren't listened to. And I feel like, and I don't think I don't necessarily approach people in your position any differently, but I think it's always really important to stop and pause, whether it's like our kids or the neighbor's kids or a kid at school, to just take a moment to be present with people because we don't know what's going on in the and to listen to them and hear them.
Yeah. And I think in general, we don't know what other people are going through. I just the other day was at a store and I saw this girl like sobbing outside. And I went up to her and I was like, "Is everything okay?" She's like, "Yeah, I can't talk right now." And I said, "Do you need a hug? Is there anything I can do for you?" And she was just like, "No, I'm okay. I'm okay. I just need a minute." Well, it turned out she worked at the store. She was my cashier when I was checking out. And she said to me, "So many people walked past me and didn't say a word. You were the only person, and I just want you to know, while I didn't take you up on your offer, I appreciate that you did that."
Yeah.
And and I think you also said something that we talked, Tracy, I don't know if you, Tracy is this neuroscientist that I had on my podcast.
Mhm.
She talks about the 9 things that cause trauma in childhood. And there are people who grow up in normal, and when I say normal, I mean not like my home, in loving homes where they still suffered trauma because of certain situations, just because you grew up in a good family and your parents love you doesn't mean that you didn't suffer,
Well,
So
yeah, because that's actually the interesting thing about trauma. And, you take 3 kids who grew up in a house or 4 kids in a house. We can all go through the same experience, traumatize one of us and not the other, because trauma is such a deeply personal thing and has so much to do with our own personality and our own experiences that like, I think getting into that game of like judging what is a traumatic event is sort of like the wrong way to look at it. The way to look at it is, was it traumatic for you? And
Yeah, that's really, really important.
yeah, it's funny. You mentioned that example of the girl that, you stopped and listened to. I wonder sometimes with people who have experienced trauma or who have gone through different things, because I feel this sometimes, that you can almost smell people who are hurting. And you almost gravitate toward them and are able to sort of help them in a way. And it reminds me of this thing that I really believe, a big thing for me. My mom died in October of 2023, and she was just an amazing person. Kind of like the opposite of the way that you describe your mom.
Oh. Well, I'm very sorry for your loss. And yes, for those who haven't listened to my podcast, you'll understand when you do.
Right, exactly. But one of the things, it was like nothing I possibly could have imagined. I anticipated the sadness, not the level of loneliness that I felt. But the one thing, if there's one universal thing I picked up on that, through that experience is, and it spoke to like many things that have happened in my life, that my suffering is what allows me to see your suffering and love you in a deeper way than I could 5 minutes before I had the last big bit of suffering. And so I'm glad you're able to bring that into the world. So go on. Go ahead.
Well, what I wanted to say about that is the whole purpose of the podcast initially wasn't about true crime. I mean, I didn't want to like focus on that. I wanted to focus on helping people. And,
I find that very relatable. The words that you just said are very relatable.
So it was like, and as my producer, Alan, and I started getting through and it was like, no, this is really good. And this should be spoken about, because in speaking about the true crime piece, you're actually bringing awareness to not only what I experienced growing up, but also to, how corrupt the world is and how corrupt the system is.
Oh,
and
yeah.
But in the end, I still am. So I'm hoping, of course, to bring awareness to that and to help people who are in jail for things they didn't actually, are charged with crimes that they didn't actually do. But also the number of women and men who have contacted me sharing their very, very personal traumas and abuses that they suffered that they've never shared with anyone has been very visceral. I have the chills and even almost tears in my eyes just thinking about how just me sharing my truth, as hard and as vulnerable as that was to do, how it really impacted and still is continually impacting other people who listen, because they're like, the one woman was like, I literally feel like I'm healing through you. Like I'm healing through being able to share with you. And that's just been the most amazing part. So as vulnerable as I am in the podcast, being able to help people is truly what my purpose is.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Culture evolves at the speed of light, just like your financial needs. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you in the know and ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve. We'll help you monitor your progress and give personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals and find your way to money. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about like sharing your story, I know exactly what you mean about, like there's a part of your story that touches on the systems, the processes we have, the safeguards that we have. But there's a part of your story where you learn a lot about things like domestic violence or parenting or, support and hope and, bonding together to get through things. But I think we as humans, like I think we all enjoy putting on a pretty face. It makes other people happy, that we're happy, and we tend to like run from our pain. And when we hear somebody who's willing to talk about their suffering, and what they've been through, I think it helps us all feel a little bit more normal, that we all go through this and that we can get through this. And I think it also allows us to then bring down our walls. Like just like the example you gave, I grew up in a beautiful, wonderful, lovely home, loving home. I experienced childhood sexual abuse. Every time I mention it, my inbox fills with people telling their stories for the first time. And I'm just glad that I have accidentally had the opportunity to be vulnerable and open those doors for people to talk about those things. And I think you do very much the same thing for a lot of topics. So I wanted to ask you something. So
Yes.
I think for most of us, at least of my generation, we somewhere between The Godfather and The Sopranos is where we got our whole idea of, or maybe hold on, let me add another one in there. New Jack City is where we got our whole idea of what being in a sort of like crime family or crime organization. I'll never forget that line. Of course, I'm not my brother's keeper, but but and one of the things I was thinking about as I was going through your podcast, I was thinking about AJ and Meadow from The Sopranos, who were Tony Soprano's kids, and I was thinking in all these things that sort of like glamorize this space, the one truth that's really in there that I think The Sopranos nailed with both kids was that both kids were traumatized by their father's choices and everyone else's choice to ignore what their father was doing. And I was just curious, like, what are the differences between the public perceptions that we have growing up in a family that's involved in whether it's petty or bigger crimes? And I'm curious about how you grew up. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard the story have you ever heard of the in Pike County, Ohio, the Roden family murders? Have you ever heard of this?
No.
It's one worth checking out. I think it was it 2016, somewhere around 2016. The police or family members show up at the trailer home of one family member to go walk their dogs, and ultimately, by the time they're done, the neighborhood had several houses from this family. 8 people were found in their beds murdered.
8?
8.
Oh,
8.
Lord.
Including a woman named Hannah Roden who had just given birth to her child.
Lord.
Yeah. And what we found out after years is that another family, the Wagner family, had killed them all over a custody dispute. I'm not even kidding. And in watching the trials, one of the real sort of like interesting sidelines was that the kids, the two boys in this family, grew up in a life where, like you described, where like crime wasn't just the thing that happened, it's like the thing that you do. And I just wonder, what was it like growing up in that?
So, at the time when you're growing up, it's just what your life is. So I didn't really realize a lot of what was going on when I was growing up. I just knew that, we had, and the crime wasn't only John Hall, who was like the notorious jailhouse snitch. There was also, the crime of sexual abuse and neglect and abandonment and all of those other things. Um, but I think when you're in it, just like, I always say and I hate to bring up like people's weight, but when you have a family who eats McDonald's and Pizza Hut and Taco Bell and that's what they're used to eating, these kids don't know any different. You know what I mean? You grow up living the life that you're taught. Your parents, your mom, and people that are older than you, this is just all you know. So when you're going through it, you don't know that it's wrong. I think I had a different sense that things were not the way that they should be. And I think I had that sense, ironically, because of my DNA. I really, truly believe that because I found out in my 40s that my mom had had an artificial insemination, and my father is actually this local doctor who donated his sperm several times. And so I'm a byproduct of my mom, who's a criminal, and this amazing human being. And, there's this whole thing about nature versus nurture. And I think, luckily for me, I have those amazing, good, holistic genes that allowed me to kind of know in my stomach, in my gut. I always say my nervous system is so on point. I like sometimes joke, and my daughter and I joke that I'm a witch because I like a good witch because I understand things differently. I feel it in my body. I felt in my body that this is not okay. This
I
life is not okay.
I completely get it because, like, when you look at things like the twin research studies of like adopted kids who have been separated,
Mm-hmm.
they were really separated at a young age or they never knew each other. And then you see the videos of them and they have the same mannerisms, but also the same ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And then you look at like the research, like the natives, indigenous people have done amazing research on this idea of epigenetics, particularly around trauma. And one of the real interesting revelations was trauma, which obviously indigenous people have gone through a lot of it. Trauma changes our DNA. And we really do pass on that trauma. And so when you
The
said
generational drama.
yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yep. And when you said that, I was like, yeah, actually, that does make sense that your genes may have given you a leg up on some level. And I get your point, right? Like, I feel it from the opposite version. Like I said, I grew up in a very loving household. I remember this moment where I was in high school, and I found out that the stepfather of one of our neighbors, whose family friend, had been sexually abusing the girls. They had actually come to my mom to tell her.
Wow.
Yeah. And, my mom did all the right things, got in touch with her dad. They were gone that day. It was like, it all the things that you would expect. But I, as somebody who grew up in a loving home, could not imagine, right? I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine my dad stealing candy bar, much less a car, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel that like it was like an aha moment for me that it sounds like you also felt, but in the other direction where you're like, there's something very wrong here.
Well, yeah, I mean, you definitely are like, this is my life. This is, we're left home alone. Mom's out having sex with so and so, oh, and she is dropping us off. Like, she used to literally drop me off, sometimes alone, sometimes with my sister, my younger sister, who's 6 years younger than me. She would drop us off at like the McDonald's Playland for hours at a local playground. Literally, in like, if I were to drive, I wouldn't let my daughter even hardly even drive down that road, let alone drop her off there. And I'm like 7 years old, 8 years old. She's just dropping us off because she's going to have sex with one of her boyfriends and she doesn't want her husband to know. So, if she has the kids, she can't be having sex, right? Or she would take us with her. You heard the story about how I was bit by a dog. She would take us with her and, we would have to wait and listen to her have sex with men. It's crazy. So like, at that, those were the things that happened that you just kind of, it's just part of your life. But as I started to get older and, just started to feel these things in my teenage years, like, I don't want to live it. Like, this is ridiculous. And maybe there was a little piece of rebellion in there too. Like, I think there was a piece of me being rebellious, but also really this feeling like I don't want to be here. I can't be here. This is not normal. I've always wanted to write a book, and I wanted to call it The Transcendent Child, because it was like, or I read a book named The Transcendent Child, and I thought, did you ever hear of that book?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so there's a book called The Transcendent Child, and I thought, oh my gosh, that should be the name of my book. Like, I'm the transcendent child. The name of the book that I wanted to write was called Guilty by Association. That was what I wanted to name my book.
That's it. Why did you want to name it? And by the way, in listening to what you're saying, like, I couldn't get out of my head, like, I know all these like single moms who are like hardworking and they have their kids. And I imagine like I see all the things they do to like shelter in their kids from the world and how hard it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
these people are exhausted, they're tired, but they're like doing everything for their kids. Like, and I think to myself, oh my God, who would do that to those little kids? But why did you want to name the book that way? Sorry.
I wanted to name my book Guilty by Association because when you grow up, growing up in the house that I grew up, and I talk about this a little bit in my podcast, none of my neighbors, like none of the kids in the neighborhood were allowed to really play with me. Everybody looked at us like with such disgust. My brother was a petty thief. So he was, out there robbing houses, and he was tearing up the neighborhood and, vandalizing and, spray painting. He even robbed our house at one point, like fake robbed our house. It was crazy and scary. But and then at, 18 years old, seeing, the news, my mom is on the news, it's like, it's embarrassing. My mom left my sister home alone. So she's all over the news. The Philadelphia Inquirer is knocking on her door. At this time, I was renting a room in this house in like, there was a 6-bedroom home that I was renting and going to school and working. And cause I was on my own since I was 15. And just the guilt, not the guilt, but I guess the shame I felt by being associated with those types of people. I am the complete opposite. I'm a rule follower. I think the worst thing I do is speed, like I literally like drive too fast, mainly because I work so much and I'm always on the go. But, I like am such a rule follower in life that it's so foreign to me to do all of these horrible things and to lie and steal and cheat and, do all these things that a lot of my family did, not all of them, but So guilty by association is like, I'm guilty because I'm associated with this family.
So you
They're
were
my family.
like, you were like the family in the neighborhood where they say don't go by that house.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Be really careful if you hang out with them.
Yeah. And this was like really so it was really amazing. I have a friend, when I released my podcast, one of my good friends that I grew up with said, "Oh my gosh, I just heard your podcast. Like, it's great. What can I do to support you?" I said, "First of all, listen. And secondly, share. If you have an opportunity, share it on your page." So we shared my podcast on his Facebook page. And there was a comment on this, post that my friend Jimmy had shared. And it happened to be my next door neighbor. Now, I didn't know her because she moved out when I was like 3 or 4 years old. But and I'm going to pull it up. I want to read it to you because I think it is like, it blew me away. I bawled my eyes out because of it was, nobody ever wants this stuff to be true, right? Like, nobody, I don't, I'm sharing these things and I hate that it's true. But I feel like by her sharing her experience and what she remembered about my family, and I'm going to read it to you. I'm finding it right now. It was like showing the receipts. Like what I'm saying is not a lie. This
It's
is
actually real.
yeah, this is real. It's coming up. I'm real close to it. So, but this was actually real. And the comment, like it made me cry, of course. And, and I contacted her. Here it is right now.
But don't you think there's some truth to that idea? Like when I think back, I mentioned the thing about childhood sex abuse. And I remember this conversation before my mom died a couple years before, where I went to my parents and I was like, did this really happen? Because I was like, did I make this whole story up in my head? And they were like, absolutely not. Here's how it happened. Here's how you guys told us. Here's X, Y, or Z. And like, truly, it gets stuffed into some place inside of you where like you even question it yourself at times. You're like, I have buried that crap so deep that
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if it's a figment.
Well, a lot. I mean, yes, those things happen where you kind of have memories from what people tell you, and then there's the memories that that your body, your brain actually keeps from you to protect you. And Tracy talks a little bit about that, about how it stores in the hippocampus because, if you remember some of the traumas that you've experienced, it overloads your body and, it just causes too much pain. So as a way of protecting it, the brain is a beautiful thing. And to protect you from the memory, it makes you forget. But then you remember in other different ways, like certain smells, certain songs that come on, sounds like again, music. If you hear a certain song, it kind of reminds you of like, oh, remember that. And this particular story that I'm about to share with you, I don't remember, but I do remember a piece of it. So I don't remember at all. I must have been 3 years old. But I remember the smell and the humidity of the like the dirt and the trees on the side of the house. Like I remember that, but I don't remember being thrown out the window. I don't remember, sitting on the couch and I found the comment and I want to read it to you because I think it was like an aha moment that okay, I'm doing the right thing with releasing the podcast and having her kind of like validate my story just meant the world to me. So he comments, "Hey, crazy story. Check out this podcast about Donna and her childhood growing up in Levittown." And this woman, Susan, says, "They were our next door neighbors on Summer Lane. I remember the stepdad, Frank, lining them all up on the couch. He was going to kill them. I think it might have been before Donna because it was in the late 70s, but I was born in 76. So this did happen and I was there and I was one of those kids lined up on the couch with a gun pointed to my head." I don't remember that, but I remember that my sister handed me out the window to my other sister. So somehow we got out of the house. The police were called. Yeah. So how like amazing. And thankfully I did remember the story, but could you imagine if I didn't remember that story? And this was like literally on someone's Facebook post. It was crazy, just really, really crazy and but validating at the same time. So I hated that she, remembered that about me, but I also was so happy that she was able to validate that, what I'm saying is not bullshit. Like it's true.
And also that there's somebody out there who in that moment had compassion and worry for you guys enough that they remember it.
Yes. Yes.
We're talking 45 years later?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. And I actually did do a little interview with her that we didn't post yet, but I'll eventually be posting that just because I don't know if it'll be in my second season or how I'll put it in there. But, she talked about how her mom told her that she wasn't allowed over at our house, that she had to stay away from Frank. And, she said that she remembered very clearly how it actually traumatized her because the mom made them lay on the ground because they were afraid that she was afraid that he was going to come and shoot them. Yeah. It's just, it's crazy.
So one of the things that this all makes me think of, and you talk about losing your best friend because of your family. What happened with that?
So as a young girl, and I would say, 3, 4, my friend Stacy, a couple houses up, her name was Stacy Cookless. She and I were the best of friends. We didn't go to school together because she went to Catholic school together. So she went to Catholic school and I went to public school. But we played every day after school. And even before we were in school, we played. She had a pool, so I slept over her house. We swam. We used to, take I'll never forget, we had the ice cream man went by and flicked a cigarette out the out the window, and we went over and picked it up and smoked it or tried to smoke it or whatever. We're coughing and
Reminds me, my best friend and I at that age, Christina, God bless her soul, she passed away in her 30s because she, it was amazing. So when we were little kids, Christina, they were our two door down neighbor, and we called her parents Aunt Jackie and guy. And I'm getting emotional because Aunt Jackie also passed away recently. But Christina may have been a year older than me. But I remember the day where the dogs were being fed. And we were like, why is that so good? So we grabbed a bunch of the dog food, ran and hid under a bed and ate it. So your smoking story.
That's adorable. I love it. Oh, and God bless her soul. May she rest in peace. But wow, what an amazing story. Sadly, I had reconnected with Stacy a couple of years ago, and I cannot get a hold of her. So I'm actually very concerned about her. I have been reaching out to other friends to see, and no one has heard from her. So hopefully she's okay. But she,
I'll say a prayer for her.
Please, but her name is Stacy, but she was my best friend. Literally we were inseparable. We used to say we were sisters. I mean, we looked at Playboy magazines together. We, we used to sneak into her dad's, actually we didn't even have to really sneak because they were literally on the back of the toilet, but he had a whole collection of them, and just all the things that you do as kids. And then one day she wasn't allowed to play with me anymore. And I thought that it was because of me, because you don't know. I didn't know why. I just knew what did I do that hurt her? And honestly, I feel like that specific situation caused a lot of insecurity for me over the years. I mean, obviously I have a lot of trauma. Obviously there's abandonment issues and, all the things, but that in particular hurt me so bad because I thought, what did I do to make her not want to play with me anymore. She literally ignored me. And not because she wanted to, but because her dad told her not to. She wasn't allowed to play with me anymore. Her parents didn't let her.
I can't imagine. Like I can, you know,
Yeah,
some
it
would
was.
argue. I'm not like super sensitive, although there's some people who are listening right now laughing. But I'm not super sensitive, but I can still remember when I was living in Texas and I didn't know this girl all that well, but she was just one of our neighbors. And I was probably like around your age. Let's see, I would have been like somewhere between 4 and 6. And she was having a birthday party, and I had invited her to my birthday party. And we were standing at the corner. I could still remember it. And she said that I wasn't invited to her birthday party. And I can
Yeah.
still remember that, right?
Yeah.
So I cannot imagine. Oh, by the way, years later, I found out it was just because no boys were invited. Right. But I can still remember it, but I cannot imagine that with my best friend.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I can't play with
Yeah. And not only was she my best friend, but she was like a place of safety for me. I loved going to her house because her mom would make us I
Mm,
remember her mom made us strawberries and she would sift confectioner sugar on top. And she knew that I loved it sweet. So she would give me a little bit of extra on my plate, like when you're eating funnel cake and you always like to, but she
scoop.
just,
Yep.
yeah. And I remember it just she cared for me. And I loved being there. I loved sleeping in her house because it was normal. It was family. It was connection. It was everyone sat and her mom made breakfast for us and her mom blew dry our hair after we got out of the pool. Little things like that were
That so
just
many of us take for granted.
that so many of you, I mean, I hate to say that because and I always it is true, but I always say that I did
I
have a
mean, look, you don't have to hold back on your suffering. I think about this often, right? You run into taking an example of sort of like people who are Black or Indigenous who are afraid to talk about their suffering because they're
Mhm,
afraid it's going to make other people feel guilty or bad.
mhm.
We do need to know. We need to
Yeah.
know. I need to know what it's like for other people to suffer so I can be a better human. So
That's so good and actually made me cry. That's making me cry just because I know that I have not had it as I know that my life was shitty. I know that a lot of people um
but I saw
are
you trying to put the brakes on it. Right? You're trying to
only because I refuse to be a victim, Jason.
mm,
I refuse to allow what happened to me to define who I am today. I refuse to allow the family that I grew up in define me, you know?
if I could make the case, it it does sort of define you in the sense that it made you who you are, but
Yeah,
it's not in the same mold as them.
right.
Like
True.
all those things that you dealt with and went through, and we know a lot of people who don't come out on the other side like
Yeah.
you have. All those things, they are the things that shaped you into probably the person right now. I imagine you're a person as a mom who's very conscientious of things, the little things for your kids and being loving and other things like that. Well, where did that come from? And I think if you go back and look at my mother and you look at generations of her family, it came from suffering,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sensitivity to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I would say that what it did, you said something earlier in the very beginning. I think we were recording. I think we were recording. You had said to me that it's almost like I think you said it's almost like you're a magnet to people who are suffering
Hmm.
or something along those lines. I don't remember
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
exact quote, but it's what I think my childhood and the traumas and trials and tribulations that I've experienced my whole life, I think what it did was it gave me the capacity to have empathy for other people. And not only people who experience trauma, but just in general. I feel like I see people with a different lens. And that goes along with Black people. That goes along with people who don't always feel like they're included. It goes along with autists, kids who are and adults who are autistic, Down syndrome, special needs kids, and where other people might not have that same capacity to really accept people for who they are. I have this uncanny ability to be able to empathize with other people and accept. And it's like we listen and we don't judge. I don't judge. I mean, there's a piece of me that judges, but
right.
but
But take a beat there for a second and
yeah,
think about that, right? Like you could have gone in the exact opposite direction, right? You could have taken your hurt and suffering and inflicted hurt and suffering on other people. Like it is so easy when we're hurting the only way other people know how much we're hurting is we hurt them.
yeah,
But instead you took it and you turned it into something good. And I don't think we should take for granted that people have a choice in that. They may
yeah,
not realize they have a choice in it, but they do have a choice, because how many families do we hear about where there's the kind of abuse that you experience where that person then becomes the abuser? And I have
yeah,
sympathy and I understand. Um, I always like to say, when you look in families and you're trying to find the bad guy, the the only thing that identifies the bad guy is the question of how far you want to go back. Because you can
yeah.
just keep
Sure.
on going and going and going,
Yeah.
um, and so it's sort of like it's a breaking probably of a cycle. But you tell this story about this neighbor. You call her a wonderful neighbor, Cindy.
Oh, yes, yes, yes,
Tell
yes.
me, tell me about Cindy. There's this one part where you talk about her holding your hand
Hmm.
and it being like one of the few moments where you felt like you're
Safe,
being
loved.
treated, yeah, that you're being treated in a loving, almost like it sounded like one of the few moments where you felt like someone was behaving like the mother that you should have had.
Yeah, and I don't think at the time I thought that, but what I do know, so basically what happened was I was walking to school, and no one cared for me. I had my older siblings, but they didn't care for me. No, I didn't know to brush my hair. I didn't know how to get the knot out of my hair. There wasn't like nobody, like my husband and I, when I was married, my husband and I gave our kids baths, and we taught the kids how to brush their hair and brush their teeth. And, we blew dry my daughter's hair, and, she would never leave the house without being clean or, having matching clothes or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's just part of like natural hygiene and teaching that to your kids. And I just didn't have that. I don't necessarily know if I was dirty, although I probably was. But she had noticed that I had this big rat's nest in the back of my hair. And I remember the rat's nest because I couldn't brush it and I didn't
Mhm.
know how to get it out. I didn't have anyone to ask. I just went to school that way. And um, she was walking she must have been walking behind me, and she grabbed my hand. And at the time, I didn't know who she was. She didn't know who I was, and I didn't know who she was. And, she walked with me and her daughter or son, I forget, dropped them off to school, and then told them that she was taking me back to her house, which could you imagine that happening now? I couldn't.
Right.
And she took me to her house, and she gave me, I don't remember if she gave me a bath or a shower, but she washed my hair. She gave me
Mhm.
clothes. She washed my clothing. She fed me. She brushed my hair. I remember her washing my face, and I remember just feeling love. I literally felt that just having someone touch me in a way that wasn't hurtful, it wasn't, nobody was hitting me, nobody was sexually abusing me. They were just giving me basic basic hygiene, right? But it felt so unnatural and so amazing to me that I literally look back on that moment, and I've looked back on that moment for it's a lot over the years as like a turning point for me. Like, this is what it's supposed to feel like. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this is what being cared for feels like. Um, yeah, it really was. And the fact that, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't listened yet, but I did end up finding her, and wow, like the amazing feeling that I had to be able to thank her. And, it was just such a beautiful moment
And
back then.
you never know the things that you do that are going to like change the act of kindness that you were going to do that is going to change somebody's life.
Yeah.
I recently got this note a couple days ago from something that I had done that like barely registered for me. And I've got the note actually here.
Let's hear it. I want to hear it.
Well, part of it says, "Thank you so much. You seriously changed my life single-handedly."
Oh,
Yeah. Right?
that's amazing. That's
And
amazing.
you never know what you're going to do. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, what was it like growing up inside that house? What did it feel like for you? And what was it like?
Unsafe. It felt, I never ever was able to like relax, if that makes sense. You know that feeling when you get into bed and you're like, it's a cold day, and you get your shower and you want to get into bed, and you just get into your bed and you get all comfy and cozy, and that like feeling of like calmness.
Mm-hmm.
Never did I ever feel that, ever,
What were you
ever.
waiting for? Like the footsteps and the,
Um,
like, what were you waiting?
I would say I would say that I was always being yelled at. I was always being told that, I had to do something. I always was in charge. My older sisters were at college, so it was like, I was always in charge. This is like after they went to college. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking like, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I was always in charge of doing the laundry and cleaning and making dinner and taking care of my younger sister. And also, yeah, my brother was very, very physically abusive towards me. My mom, she didn't like what I did. She used to like grab my hair and hit my head against the wall. And she would always say, "I'm going to knock your fucking teeth down your throat." Like, and the way she said it, it was just, she literally hated me, and I don't know why. I still to this day have no idea why she hates me. She never loved me. She never showed me love. She never, there was never any compassion. It was almost like she was jealous of me, maybe. I don't know. Like, so what was I waiting for? To be hit, to be yelled at, to be screamed at, to be sexually abused,
You had it
to
coming from every direction.
every direction. And there are days, even now, Jason, at 49 years old, that I feel that same panic, that same like,
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And it can be something as similar, like as going outside and you're talking about the hippocampus, which like translates our short-term to long-term memory. And, you know, it could be, the cold, the smell of the cold air,
yeah,
like that
yeah.
snap. Or for me, like on a blue September day where the skies are clear, I will snap right back to 9/11. I was in New York for it. And
Um,
it's the strangest things that will trigger it.
yeah.
Did I imagine like the verbal abuse, the yelling, which is always keeping you on edge and probably frustrating and making you anxious. Everyone knew about that, but did other people in your house know about the sexual abuse?
Oh, yeah. We were all sexually abused.
Oh wow.
In fact, I probably got it my younger sister and I probably got it less than anybody else.
Than your older sister.
Yeah, they were much more physically abused and sexually. I mean, we all were. I feel like a lot of my abuse, and I say this a lot, I feel like a lot of the trauma that I experienced is watching my brother get hurt, get abused, get physically abused, because he took a lot of abuse. He did. He sadly, because of he was the only boy and his father wasn't around, so he was the stepson, and he was unruly, probably ADHD, he was a little fucker, just constantly like needling and nitpicking. He was just that typical ADHD boy that, pissed my mom's men off. So he got a lot of really horrific abuse, sadly. Which is
Did your
why
mom know about all the abuse?
Oh, yes. My mom was there. My mom was abused, but she was there. My mother dropped. So first of all, let's think about this. My mother set my brother up for a crime he didn't commit, okay, for a murder. My mother and her husband did this to my brother. So yes, my mom knew. But even when I was a kid, my mom dropped me off at Frank's house. And after she knew that he sexually abused all of us, she would he left the house and he lived in a trailer, and she would drop me off, knowing that he was going to sexually abuse me. And he did. The one time, she sent me with my Barbies and he used my Barbie doll. It's horrible. Yeah, horrible.
Well, one of the things I was going to ask you about was with the, as you're going through all this and you're dealing with those different things, and you just brought up your brother and him being set up for a crime. One of the things I was thinking about, and you had mentioned this a little bit earlier, that you've become interested in like innocence and wrongful conviction cases and even wrongful accusations. And I was thinking about, your stepdad, and you describe in the podcast that he did criminal things. I've got the quote here: the way that other families did normal things. And so he was constantly, but obviously he was not like the mastermind criminal who's going to get away with it all. He's constantly getting arrested, constantly getting in trouble. And, I was wondering, do you think that's why he built this elaborate sort of like system of creating fairy tales about other people that were getting them jailed to get himself out of trouble?
Oh, 100%. That's why he did it. He did it. And I actually was just reading this week, because I'm trying to find content for my Patreon page. I just went through and was reading all of the letters, not all of, but quite a few of the letters that John wrote my mom. And it's so clear in there. The only reason he did this, even though he said that he felt like he was a superhero because he was protecting, the world by putting these killers and abusers away, he wasn't. He was doing this strictly to get out of jail. He couldn't live he never had a job, ever.
Thanks for joining us. This is the first of 2 episodes that Donna and I are going to do together. We'll be back in a few days. If you'd like to, in the meantime, join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For those of you who are interested in true crime, you can check out our new publication, The True Crime Times, on Substack, for deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners. And to support the podcast, you can also join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Linings Handbook. I also want to take a second right now to talk about one of my favorite charities. You guys know that we had Bruce Maitland, the father of 17-year-old Brianna Maitland, who went missing in Vermont in 2004, on as a guest. Bruce is an amazing person. And one of the things that Bruce talks about is how important it is to know that there's someone out there looking for Brianna. Well, Bruce has created a charity called Private Investigations for the Missing, and they provide high-quality investigators who are licensed and who are familiar with working with law enforcement to families of the missing. This is so important. I cannot tell you how many guests that I've had on who are family members of victims who have been scammed or something else by unqualified private investigators. So I just wanted to encourage you guys as a PSA, and a way to do something good is to look up Private Investigations for the Missing and consider donating or somehow else getting involved in it. Talk to you guys soon. I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast.